Hello friends, in this video we will learn about definition of human rights. The learning outcome that I expect from this video is that you should be able to define human rights and you should be able to understand at least one of the standard definitions of human rights. So in the earlier class I gave you one assignment to define human rights and you responded wonderfully. Let me sum up many of your definitions like this. Human rights are the rights enjoyed by a person by virtue of being a human being to lead a life with dignity and liberty. So I would like to give the credit to your class for defining human rights like this. This is exactly the meaning of the human rights or the essence of human rights. These are the rights enjoyed by any person just because they are a human being, and this helps us to lead a life with dignity and liberty. Even if the human being does not belong to any country, even if he is a man from a newly found island, he has got some rights just because he is a human being. This is exactly the essence of human rights. Let us move on to more standard definitions by different institutions. I have quoted four different definitions of human rights in this lecture. Let us go through that. First, the United Nations Center for Human Rights defines human rights as those rights which are inherent in our nature and without which we cannot live as human beings. So this definition understands that the human rights is part of our inherent nature of being a human being. This definition goes much hand in hand with your definition of human rights. This definition understands that human rights are part of ourselves. Then S. Kim defines human rights in another way. He defines human rights as claims and demands essential to the protection of human life and the enhancement of human dignity, and should therefore enjoy full social and political sanctions. So we can summarize this definition as human rights are a set of demands essential to the protection of human life. So they are certain additional external things that we need to protect our human life and to enhance the human dignity. You do not have to feel worried about these jargon words that you see here, like the social and political sanctions. You can simply try to get the essence of these statements. Sometimes it is better to rephrase the phrase made by some important institutions like the United Nations or any other person. Then Milne defines human rights in another way. He defines human rights as simply what every human being owes to every other human being, and as such represent universal moral obligation. So here you can see yet another definition, and it does not see human rights as something which we own. It sees human rights as something we should give to others. It is our duty and not our rights. Human rights are something which we are bound to do in the society, and when everybody is doing their duty, everyone will be guaranteed their rights. So this definition by Milne actually sees human rights as duty. The earlier definitions by UN or S. Kim, we saw human rights as something which we are guaranteed, something which we get from the society. But in this definition of Milne, he defines human rights as something which we should do or we owe to the society. Then finally, from the Indian context, let us study one definition of human rights. The Protection of Human Rights Act 1993, the most important legal instrument existing in India in the context of human rights. And this act defines human rights as human rights means rights relating to life, liberty, equality and dignity of the individuals, guaranteed by the Constitution or embodied in the international covenants and enforceable by courts in India. So this legal instrument in India defines human right not as inherent to our character of being a human, but something which is guaranteed by the Constitution, something which is written down in the Constitution or embodied in any of the international covenants, and something which should be enforceable in the courts in India. So according to this Protection of Human Rights Act, anything cannot be human right. You cannot just go out and argue that you have this right or that right. If that has some sufficient legal background, if that is enforceable in Indian courts only, you are guaranteed rights. So this definition is much useful or applicable in the Indian context. Whenever we are saying the rights of an Indian citizen, it should be backed by its enforceability in any of the Indian courts. So these are the four definitions, four standard definitions that I put before you. You can choose any of the two definitions. I recommend you to learn United Nations definition and the Human Rights Act definition. You can also go with your own definition of human rights, which sums up the essence of all these definitions. So I hope all of you understood the definition of human rights. Thank you.